If you say you're going to do this thing, can you do this thing you say you're going to do? It's not just a discussion how it might happen. How is it actually happening? If I tell you to grab that guy's feet and try to go around them and they're resisting you, can you actually do it?
The guard pass, for example, right? I would approach a guarded player, say, all right, I want to do this move, this move. If this move doesn't work, I'm going to do this move.
We sometimes don't have a lot of creativity to think past our own experiences.
One of the most destructive sentences that blocks progress is, it's always been done that.
As opposed to like remembering step by step, the X pass or the leg drag pass or the knee cut pass, any of the like that. What were the invariant things that never changed amongst those things? And that's what our practice focuses on. If I focus on those things, I'm able to solve grappling problems.
The typical path that you always go down, you can create a bunch of things from that versus just doing that.
If we train someone a specific grip with a specific action, we're actually blinding them to the possibility.
What do you guys got going on over here?
What you mean?
Since last time you were here, what you got going on?
Man, we got him to ADCC, won West Coast Trials.
A little bit more proof of concept.
Well, in a sense,
what you're doing, yeah.
Well, you know, there's a long history to it, but, you know, he decided to take on the burden to try to use my philosophies and ideas to try to make it, and he made them his own. So, yeah, you know, it says more about him than it does about me, you know, so.
What do you think kind of makes a good marriage when it comes to like a coach and an athlete?
Communication. Like, if we both care about each other and care about where we're going and we talk along the way, we're more likely to get there and accomplish the thing we set out to do, you know? If we can't communicate, if we're not on the same path going towards the same goal, I think it could really be deleterious to our relationship.
I think it, you know, aligning with that same mission. You know, when I first got to Standard, it was like, I really wanted to take, you know, grappling as far as I could, you know, and I didn't know anything about the approach or anything like that. But, you know, I started training with him. I realized, like, you know, my coach, Greg, he really cared about the development of his guys. And that's what really got me into like, hey, let me dive into this approach a little bit more. Let me be an athlete. Let me buy into this and like really practice genuinely, you know?
And you were a black belt when you got to Standard, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I was a black belt. I think I was already training, it was like 12 years already. Yeah, but mainly in the gi. And
okay.
Yeah. So when I first got there, I was, you know, I was talking to Greg, I was picking Greg's ear, and I was like, he was doing it totally different from what I was used to. You know, I came from the traditional approach, what typical jiu-jitsu practitioners are exposed to, you know, warm up, do a couple of drills, and do like 5 open rounds at the end of the practice. And, you know, I thought I had a pretty good understanding of what jiu-jitsu was at the time. I'm a black belt already. And what I noticed is like, man, this practice is really opening my eyes to like what grappling actually could be. And not to mention, a lot of his guys were piecing me up when I first got there. Yeah. See, these guys were like blue belts and purple belts. It's like, what's going on here? And then I started just kind of like picking his ear and then reading some of the things he was reading. And then from there, just, you know, did what an athlete should do, listen to their coach and see where it takes them.
What made you interested in the first place? Like, what caught your attention?
The practice, first thing was the practice was more fun. Like, it was all live. It was all live. You know, if you guys ever, you know, look into the constraint slide approach, there's live goes, sparring, right? But you had different wind conditions, different ways to play the game. And I was like, the thing about it was it was always fun, right? There was no like passive like drilling or anything like that. And I felt like I was like I would see like the problem solving occur real time. You know,
maybe like a little less right and wrong.
Right.
Yeah, more effective. You know what I mean? Because it's like, if you say you're going to do this thing, can you do this thing you say you're going to do? It's not just a discussion how it might happen. How is it actually happening? Yeah. If I tell you to grab that guy's feet and try to go around them, and they're resisting you, can you actually do it? So you get to see the effect of your actions right away. And I think it links the athlete with their environment. And I think that he responded incredibly well to that.
Like the online problem solving because it's live, right? It's a live resisting body. It's like that online problem solving was a big thing that I really enjoyed in this with the practice structure.
I don't know if you can remember back to kind of when you first started over there at Standard versus like kind of how you approach roles now. I know you have much more skill, but it's like just 4 more years, right? what do you think was different with how you head into a role and like your intention with what you were going to do versus now the way you head into the roles, your reactions and intentions?
So one of the things like in the traditional approach, you have this encyclopedia of moves that you're trying to apply to somebody, and that was something that I had to try to get away from. It's like when some of the things like it's like a guard pass, for example, right? Mm-hmm. I would approach a guarded player, say, all right, I want to do this move. If this move doesn't work, I'm going to do this move. But really, it's like we're really just trying to solve some invariant problem that's always occurring in the guard. And that's how I approach now, like, what things don't change, right? And focus on maintaining those conditions as opposed to, trying to pull out a move from the moves I remember. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
How'd you get Deandre to like buy in? Was it just pairing him up with appropriate people kind of thing?
Well, so he'll never talk about himself, so I'll do it. So he already came with a deep well of capacity. It was a gift for me as a coach. He's a completely dedicated and committed person to absolutely everything he does. And I'm not saying that because he's standing here. Like anyone who knows the man, even before me, would tell you the same thing. And I think he approaches everything with that attitude. So when he met me, he took me on as I am. He took my program on as I am. And he's like, okay, this feels good. I'm going to give it a shot. Because we had a conversation. I said, do you like it here? Do you like what we're doing? I mean, if you were my student, would you feel comfortable doing things differently to try a new idea? And he said, yeah, sure, for sure. And I think it was interesting too because—
Can we back up on that just for a second?
Yeah.
Like, where did you learn that?
Learn what?
Learn asking him a question like that. Because that's rare. Like, people don't usually do that. Like, you started off with the most fundamental thing. Hey, are you open to trying some new, different stuff?
A coach must care more about his athlete than he does himself. It's not about me. It's about us. And so I need to know who I'm speaking to and what their drives are, what their interests are, who they are. So I start with a question so I can see who's speaking to me. I don't know where I learned that from. I value communication. So I just started with that, And what was interesting too is he came with, like I said, a deep well for capacity. He's an athlete. He's physical. He's strong. He's durable. He's great, right? So when he first started interacting with my athletes, he could beat them with just physicality, but then he was losing like basic stuff, even to like lower belts, so to speak. And so I think that was pretty convincing for him because he realized, oh yeah, man, I'm a black belt. I'm strong. I'm fast. I know what's going on, but there's something here that I might need to understand more of. And he just took it on as a project, and now you see him now,
I mean, for me, it was like, if it even cause I didn't immediately buy into what people call the ecological approach, and I don't think we ever said that. Somebody put that on the internet, but but one of the things was like, if it meant that I had a chance to get better, why not do it? That was the thing. I was really open to doing something like that because let's say 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year down the road that I didn't get better, I could just go back the old way, right? Mm-hmm. But that wasn't the case. I started really like understanding grappling more deeply, and I was like, all right, this is pretty cool. I'm gonna keep doing this, and I should probably listen to my coach. Yeah.
Why do you think that so many people in jiu-jitsu, especially those who are like experienced and people who instruct jiu-jitsu, why are they so triggered when they hear about stuff like this? Because I mean, you would expect that, there's always a want to improve, right? So shouldn't we kind of be open to different ideas when it comes to improving on a martial art?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's how we view challenge, right? A lot of these high-level grapplers are using this like technical explanation, this process-oriented understanding as a way to make money, or they've attached because of that, they attach their identity to it. So you're not just attacking an idea, you're attacking their identity. Like if you're a guy who's got 6 DVDs on BJJ Fanatics and you realize that your long-winded bullshit explanation over 8 hours does nothing to improve somebody's skill and someone tells it to you, you can't separate what they're saying from who you think you are. And so you're like, oh no, this guy's a fucking asshole. Why would he say that to me? He's, that could be one of the reasons. Or people are just in general resistant to change, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think people just don't like Greg.
That's probably it too. Like, fuck me, right?
Let me ask you this on top of that, because like, okay, the constraints-led approach is quite different because like it's not like you give an example of this is the way a movement is done. Drill it, do it. You have a constraint. You let the individual figure out their own expression of how to get to that end point. Couldn't there be like I would actually assume that grapplers who have a lot of experience, like you did when you came into this, you had a well to kind of pull from when you were working within the constraints, which allowed you to expand your knowledge of what you were doing because there was more self-expression. There was more, I guess, nuanced understanding for you to create things, right? So wouldn't there be a strength in both?
Well, it's not that there's not a both. And so when we say something like drilling or technique or the CLA, we're actually making claims about the nature of reality. How do the things we do affect future things that we do? So when we say we drill, we say that static motion repeated over and over again has an effect on skill acquisition. When we say putting somebody in the environment, letting them play, the constraints present have an effect on a skill acquisition. So we're actually saying different things about the nature of how learning occurs. So there is no marriage. And when we say previous capacity, what are we really talking about? Do we use previous knowledge as a way to acquire new skill, or is it just the experience of moving our bodies that we bring with us? Bigger bones, stronger tendons, more drive to fight. There's a lot of questions when you ask that question. It's not as simple as that.
Okay.
I think one of the things I had, like you're saying, I had previous experiences. Like, I think people want to say it was like the previous drilling I did, but you have to also not ignore the fact that my brother and I came up and we were competing for 10 years already, like touching live bodies. We were some high level guys. We were in the gi, definitely not in no gi, but like we had experience competing. And I think that makes a big difference. You know, I was actually talking to one of my friends and he was like, a lot of the argument between, you know, the traditional approach and the ecological approach, we were talking about it at breakfast, is like, it's more of a language thing, you know, that people are not agreeing with the language. But, you know, I made a point where like, you know, everybody that's at that elite level of grappling, there's one thing for sure that they always did. They've competed. They competed for, like, experience does not change, like, especially at that high, you know, at high stress levels of competition, that produces like skill. Right? And essentially what we're doing with our approach we're spending more time expressing skill in a live environment. And I think that may play like a big lever to pull in acquiring that skill or developing that skill.
You guys are bringing up some really interesting stuff. It makes me think a little bit about what I can compare it to, which is strength training. And strength is a skill. Takes a long time normally for people to build up skill. But there's a lot of reckless years of experience. You know, someone could be like, oh, well, this guy, you know, it took him 15 years to squat 1,000 pounds. Well, that ain't the case anymore. There's guys that are 23 years old that are squatting 1,000 pounds in just a pair of knee wraps. So a lot of disastrous things have happened over the years to powerlifters. People got smart to it. They started figuring things out in a different way. There's different ways to train. There's not really one way to train still, but there's better ways of training. And I think people are starting to find those. And that's why we're seeing, you know, some people say, oh, it's the deadlift bars, they bend more and so on. But we're seeing like a crazy amount of 900-pound deadlifts. And we're just seeing the strength even on the bench press and the squat. And it's not just the barbell, like something else is happening. And again, you know, I could sit here and say, I had to work this hard to like do this way. And I could also think, because that was my history and that was my experience and my background, I might think that somebody else has to do that same type of work, and they just don't. And the same thing happens with wealth nowadays. People don't have to work the same way that they did. You have an idea, you have an invention, you have a product, put it on the internet. I mean, it's not always that easy. But that's way different than a manual labor job and then trying to figure out a way to work your way up into that company to become a manager and then to become the GM and then maybe you own the place or something like that. So I think that all we can sometimes think of, we sometimes don't have a lot of creativity to think past our own experiences.
For sure. I mean, I think I read this somewhere that one of the most destructive sentences that blocks progress is, it's always been done that way. And so I think we don't ever start with that. We have a historical record that certain things that we have done led to certain outcomes, but we can look back at that record and ask ourselves, if we were to take certain things out and put new things in for the future, what gives us the biggest bang for our buck? What is always happening? And how do those happenings affect future states? If we can talk about that honestly and debate about it, and we can start implementing those things, I think we get better results in the future. And I think that's what we see happening in any field, really.
Like, could you imagine if everybody had to go through the same thing that you had to? There'll be no advancement in the whatever field you're talking about, you know? And I think it's important for, like, you know, that next generation to get the newer generation right to the point where they left off, so they could start having a platform to just grow the community or whatever field that we're referring to, you know?
Yeah, it's that NPC mentality that I talked about, right? Because we brought this up when it came with like people not wanting to go outside of what science says, right? Like the studies say this, so that's the end all be all. And so I just said it's like creates a NPC mentality where you just do what like the program tells you to do.
He and I were talking about this morning. Like, you can read a bunch of different papers and get to different conclusions. So science says a lot. So I think people who are trying to use what's known have to still be open to experimentation. One of the researchers, I always attribute this to Carl Newell. I've said it a lot. He said, we need to basically teach what is known, but leave room for what is unknown. And so I try to take that seriously. Yeah, read all the shit, read all the papers, get all the facts, but what's happening in front of you? You know what I mean? Sometimes they're competing.
So with that in mind, then where can a coach start to explore some of this stuff? Because like I remember at the seminar, somebody was like, "Hey, tell me your secrets," and you know that was freaking hilarious. And you're like, "Look, you can't just like have X's and O's and create your own games. Like you got to have. It's all like." Even though you don't like the word situational, but it is like a situational thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So like, yeah, where does a coach begin to explore some of this approach?
Well, I think first there's a couple things that have to sort of come together, and I can only use my experience to talk on this. So one, I wanted to be a good coach. What does a good coach do? He produces effect and change in his athlete. Okay, so how do I do that? I didn't know how to do it. Yeah, I'd grappled for 10 years when I opened my own school, but I had never coached. So research what coaching is, what's learning, what's behavior, what's going on. That's the first step. Second, you need a room, you need a platform. I was lucky enough to have guys to come in every day, you know, to learn under me. And I was able to use them and experiment as I was learning to how to be a coach, because it's relational, right? So like, as I try things, my athletes do things, they communicate back, and then we have this like relationship going on. And that gives me a lot of room to experiment with these ideas. Like I taught 21 classes a week for 10 years. You know what I mean? And I was constantly reading and updating and changing. And then lucky enough, I got him, and everything kind of just went together. So all that babbling's to say, do the reading, pick a direction you want to go in, have something to apply it to, keep doing it until you figure it out. There's no magic.
And then Deandre, when you came from a traditional school, like what part was like the most annoying of it all? Like especially, and I do want to ask you about no gi and with the gi, but specifically with this in mind, from traditional to this approach, like what was the aspect of it where you're like, all right, this is fucking stupid. Like this isn't going to work.
Well, I mean, when I got to standard, you know, I was already a black belt. And one of the most annoying things, personally, at least, was like, I felt like I needed to unlearn everything I did prior. I felt like it was wasted, right? But, you know, when I was first going to standard, I would this is a tangent, but I would travel there for like 3 hours. I was living 3 hours away.
Could you get closer to the mic?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was like living 3 hours away. Ooh. And one of the things was like on that car ride, I just had time just to think and reflect on that. And like, so I'm like thinking like, oh man, this last 10 years was wasted, but it wasn't. It wasn't wasted. You know, it's just, I just had what this approach really did was like change my perspective on practice, and then in turn change my perspective on competing, and change my perspective on how to be an athlete in a room. Like one of the things was like, you had your list of moves in the traditional approach, and it's like, I know that I've had success prior to like training at standard. I know I've had success with these moves before. One of the things that helped me like bridge that gap between coming from the traditional approach and going to like the constraints-led approach or the ecological approach was like, when I looked at all those moves that were successful in the past, I started looking at what were the things that never changed about those moves, the invariant things about those moves. And now with this practice, with this approach, I was able to like, that's what I focus on now, as opposed to like remembering step by step the X pass or the leg drag pass or the knee cut pass, any of the like that. What were the invariant things that never changed amongst those things. And that's what our practice focuses on, you know. And now it doesn't matter what move I do. It's just if I focus on those things, I'm able to solve grappling problems, you know.
So let me ask you this, man, because you guys mentioned it's kind of like a different language. So when you're watching jiu-jitsu, when you're explaining things, you don't look at it through the, like that's a De La Riva. You don't necessarily look at things that way.
No, I mean, well, he and I talk a lot about this. And so as I was training and coaching him, I was actually watching him and learning from him. So again, it was a reciprocal relationship. And so we talked about language a lot.
Yeah.
And so what I try to understand is how can we talk about the thing without referring to the thing? So how could I talk about reverse De La Riva without calling it that? So what that forced me to do is look at what was actually going on. And so that's where we start. But it doesn't mean we don't say reverse De La Riva, because both of us know that if I take one of my hooks, move it across the center line, hook it onto that leg, we can call that reverse De La Riva. But we also know the condition of creating it and the function that comes from that condition. And that's what we look at when we watch grappling. And that's what we discuss. You know what I mean? Oh man, that was a great hook. He was able to really pull him forward really well. And so reverse De La Riva, fine. But we understand it before it was called that. We understand the origin of its emergence, like why,
like the raw ingredients.
Yeah, exactly right.
And think about like if you got someone that didn't know jiu-jitsu at all, and you told them reverse De La Riva, they'll look at you like, "Huh? You're like speaking a different? You're literally speaking a different language, you know." But if you told them about a hook and a hook attaches to something to create an effect, you know, that language is a little easier to coach as opposed to your coach telling you do a reverse De La Riva, you know, or do a X pass Barambolo, 9,000, whatever.
It kind of reminds me of like the first principles idea that you hear from like Musk, like it's finding the raw ingredients for these things and figuring out how to make these things work rather than like the whole, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I was just talking about the other day, like here's what's fascinating. The gun was invented before the first law of thermodynamics. Isn't that interesting? Like we created, we used like the way energy changes over time to create a deadly projectile, but we didn't understand why it worked. We knew mechanically how a gun works because we created it, but we didn't know fundamentally how a gun works. Fundamentals are advanced ideas. They're not basic. We reach fundamentals later on because reasoning is ad hoc. The world exists first and we describe it later. So jiu-jitsu is no different. It's just that, and I don't mean to say this as an arrogant thing, but we're talking to untrained thinkers, myself included, okay? But I go through the trouble of trying. Because if I say that shit, people are like, Greg Souders is a self-aggrandizing asshole. No, man. I read fucking 50 books a year, you know? Fuck. That's all I'm saying.
He doesn't even have any kratom in him right now.
No.
Let's get him some kratom.
Those confrontation stories are making sense.
But you guys get it, right? How frustrating is it when you put in a ton of effort just to understand the tiniest thing and you're just like, hey, this is kind of like what level I'm operating on. And they'll be like, yeah, fuck you, idiot. Yeah, that's super annoying. But anyway, I'm only saying is you have to be trained to try to think this way. It took effort to try to see the simplest thing. It took effort for me because I had to do the same thing Dee did. When I came from the traditional approach, which I did too, I mean, I came from Lloyd Irvin and he was a high rep driller. Like that's what we did. And everything was symbolic, everything was named. And so I had to unlearn all that. And I had to look back at the thing as it actually was before it was named. And that took a lot of effort. So anyway, yes. So first principles.
I think that like using the word we're using unlearning like we're trying, almost in a sense like we're trying to forget what we did before. But I really think it's more of like when you change your practice a little, your perspective changes a little bit. And I think that's the more important thing.
More like refining.
Right.
You're not really forgetting. You're just like, oh, this is how this works. And then you can find a more efficient way to get to that same move.
You just see the past a little differently. You know, why that worked. Maybe why that worked in the past wasn't maybe the way I thought it worked. Does that make sense? And then and when you change that perspective a little bit, say, oh, it still aligns with what's going on now. It's just I have different language to describe it. I have a different viewpoint to look at it from, you know.
I think one of the really cool things about this though is if any grappler does listen, you can think of like your game and what you typically do. And the thing is if you understand not just the specific path, the ABC path of which you do it, but all those raw ingredients like this hook here, this grip here, you understand the nuances of those. You can then create a bunch of different things rather than like collar sleeve, sweep, the typical path that you always go down. You can create a bunch of things from that versus just doing that.
For sure. No, absolutely. And that's the point, right? There's a set of conditions that create a set of effects. And I say set because I don't know exactly what the amount is. But if we train someone a specific grip with a specific action, we're actually blinding them to the possibility.
Yeah.
So actually, it's funny. I had a really great conversation with John Danner a few times. I've talked to him quite a bunch over the years. We had a 45-minute conversation at trials. And of course, I would never say anything that he said because, again, that was between he and I. But he did make a point, and he said something like he's trying to do the same thing I do. He's trying to affect people's intention and attention. Those are my words, not his. And he talked about getting people to look at things and see things. But something that he didn't realize when saying that is what he was actually doing is blinding people to other things. And his example was, if I tell you to look for an orange car and you're looking up orange cars, like, did you see the purple one? No, because you were constrained, so I told you to look for an orange one. But he thought that was helpful. And I was like, well, it's not helpful because if you say, look at the orange car, that's all you'll ever look for. But if I give you a way to look at what's in front of you that's not too specific, that allows you to see a grander scope of what's going on, you have more to operate within. And that can lead to more robust learning over time. And so that's what we're trying to do with condition and effect, for example.
Quick question on that. Do you think, I guess this might go back to something I referenced again before, but look for the orange car, right? Okay. Do you think that there's a benefit in looking for the orange car, but then broadening your view to everything else?
Depends on why.
Okay.
So anytime we constrain something, we have to understand what are we constraining it for. If we only have the specifics and we don't know what their utility is, we're, having a hammer and treating everything like a nail. We can't do that because when we're talking about coaching, we're talking about dealing with individuals. True coaching only happens on a one-to-one level. There's really no such thing as a general coach, right? We can try our best, but really it's the relationship a coach has with each one of his students. So I think if we get too specific in our understanding, we sort of pigeonhole ourselves. We can't operate amongst a bunch of different, the things I have to say to D must be different than things I would say to you or the things I would say to you. So if I only have people look for orange cars, then I'm treating everyone like the same person.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know.
But in terms of grappling, we're all if he was our coach, he's really trying to create the same effect within us. Obviously, how you're going to take it versus how you're going to take it versus how I'm going to take it is going to be totally different. How we're going to come to those solutions are going to be totally different. But he's still understanding that we are in grappling, we're trying to create this effect, a specific effect,
Yeah. And sorry, Mark, this is the last thing I'm going to mention. But the massive strength in this, though, is every grappler does have their different biological negatives or positives.
100%.
Some have crazy grips. Some have really, really weak grips. Some have certain things that hurt in their back and this and that. And that'll make just doing certain positions, as we call them, kind of difficult. But if there is an understanding of this is where we need to get, these are the constraints that you set up, each person can find out what their body is able to do to get from point A to point B successfully, which might look very different from me, you, and you.
For sure. And I think the constraints-led approach or looking at things through an ecological psychology/dynamics perspective gives us this freedom as coaches because if our perspective of what's happening changes, we give a wider view. And so I think it helps us do exactly that.
Can you explain your method a little bit for some of the people that maybe didn't catch the first round when we podcasted with you?
Well, my method is different, but what we use as a method to inform what I do is the constraints-led approach. And it's just the idea that we use live resistance, so we have people grapple, and we constrain it, basically, which means we create focuses that limit options so that they can search solution space, or they can search a small aspect of grappling and learn how to problem solve within that small aspect.
Boxed up idea.
For sure. We kind of shrink the search area, give people tasks, and let them perform those as a way for them to create a deeper relationship between their actions and their effects. And then by doing that over time at a high enough volume, at a high enough frequency, and with other measures, they start to develop the ability to do those things they set out to do. A simple way I say is, we're able to do what we intend to do. So I set these intentions, let them play with it, and we guide it along as it goes. And
did you discover that through coaching?
Well, I learned about it. So I was kind of how to coach is my first thing. Well, how do people learn? And searching for in different fields and different
I wonder
things.
how many coaches have kind of even ever looked that up, like how to coach.
Well, I don't know. I didn't know anything about it, so I figured that's where I would start, right? But yeah, it was in the literature. I just came across it, and I saw this thing, ecological psychology, ecological dynamics. What the hell is this? And it was based on this idea of self-organization, and that was very interesting to me. I'd never heard anything like that before. So I started reading about it, reading a bunch of white papers I didn't understand, and it was just so interesting. I was like, I'm gonna see if I can apply this crap. And then I just started trying it, and the effects were almost immediate within a few weeks of just removing some of the waste that I thought was in practice. I was like, man, students are performing better almost immediately. And I was like, this is interesting. So I just kept going with it.
And now I know why you said that you needed to have a great knowledge of jiu-jitsu to read that and then understand how it could be applied. Because if you read that first before ever learning jiu-jitsu, you wouldn't know where to apply it to.
Well, yeah, he and I were just talking about this. He was like, one of the easiest, because I introduced the ideas to him, and he said the easiest way for him to digest some of that difficult material was to use his previous experience in jiu-jitsu. It made because when you read the stuff, it was like, in this button pressing task, in this volleyball task, what the fuck do we know about button pressing and volleyball? Nothing. Right?
So one of the things I did was when I started training with Greg was, all right, I wanted to question everything he was doing, but I didn't have a solid foundation to question from. So let me try to read some of this stuff. Some of those stuff was talking about like button pressing tasks, like volleyball, things I don't have any knowledge for. So what I would do as I was reading some of these books, like how I would try to find the analog to grappling while I was reading. And it made me, one, keep the book open, and then two is like, I started understanding the material through what I knew already,
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this, because when it comes to going into high-level competition, right? You've already been grappling. Now you're 4 years with this. Mm-hmm. What did you notice maybe was the difference this year going into competition with the skills that you managed to learn at standard, or the different way of grappling that you managed to learn?
One of the things that, not even it was more the practice structure. We had a lot of guys that, it's more like I would say a cultural thing in the gym, right? Like we had a lot of like-minded individuals working for like-minded things, and training with those people, I think that just gets you better, some of the, if you're trying to reach a high level of grappling and you're training with guys that just train 2 times a week, you have to get the 9 to 5s, they're just hobbyists. It's a lot different from when you got a room of guys that are aligned with the same thing. I think that's what made the biggest difference, because I'm in a room with guys that are really trying to improve every day, and we're trying to get to the same place.
Now, along with that, I'm curious, both of you guys, because with the way that you're teaching jiu-jitsu, you mentioned there's a lot of hate on Reddit. There's a lot of hate within certain aspects of jiu-jitsu because it's a very different way of teaching that's not traditional. Do you think that there are expectations that are a bit unfair when it comes to what you're doing?
Oh, for sure.
Just because it's like, you have this way of teaching, show me your gold, show me your champions. You know what I mean? And so how do you guys take that? What do you guys put on yourselves?
So I made the ignorant mistake of responding back occasionally, and which I shouldn't have. And just being an idiot. Because the thing is, even if I talk to researchers and PhDs, subject matter experts all the time, even if I talk to one that disagrees with me, they never treat me like that. They treat me with respect for even trying to read their work. And we have great conversations. And so when I read the average Redditor that, oh my God, I can't even.
Bring up the button.
it's like, what's funny is the things you're criticizing me for, you're not even part of.
Yeah.
You're a nobody. You have no students. I mean, so I shouldn't even pay attention, honestly.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I really don't. I'm not on Reddit, but people send me things, and that's what kind of triggers me, because I get it. I got like, look at this, coach. When people just start like bombing my stuff with people, and I'm like, oh, don't look.
It's the guys in the gym, man. They send it to like, dude.
So they just want to trigger you. Your students want to trigger you.
No, it's just the young cats. I think they
like it. They like it.
People want to see me pop off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's my fault, because like I have that kind of personality where I don't mind making a fool out of myself occasionally. Because I learned from it too. But like I said earlier, it's really honestly, I'm starting to change because I don't want to embarrass my people. Like it's not just me. If it were just me out there acting foolish, fine. but I'm not trying to put a bad mark on my students because they're the ones that matter, not really me, because they're the one that's going to take all the stuff that I'm teaching them and they're going to move it forward. Like Deandre's going to learn from me and become better than me, and Noah's going to learn from me and become better than me, and Sid's going to learn, you know what I mean? So I have kind of a responsibility to them to button my shit up a little bit and be a little more professional. So, but yeah.
If you're someone that's taking supplements or vitamins or anything to help move the needle in terms of your health, how do you know you really need them? And the reason why I'm asking you, how do you know, is because many people don't know their levels of their testosterone, their vitamin D, all these other labs like their thyroid, and they're taking these supplements to help them function at peak performance. But that's why we've partnered with Merrick Health for such a long time now, because you can get yourself different lab panels like the Power Project panel, which is a comprehensive set of labs to help you figure out what your different levels are. And when you do figure out what your levels are, you'll be able to work with a patient care coordinator that will give you suggestions as far as nutrition optimization, supplementation, or if you're someone who's a candidate and it's necessary, hormonal optimization to help move you in the right direction so you're not playing guesswork with your body. Also, if you've already gotten your lab work done, but you just want to get a checkup, we also have a checkup panel that's made so that you can check up and make sure that everything is moving in the right direction if you've already gotten comprehensive lab work done. This is something super important that I've done for myself. I've had my mom work with Merrick. We've all worked with Merrick just to make sure that we're all moving in the right direction and we're not playing guesswork with our body. Andrew, how can they get it?
Yes, that's over at merrickhealth.com/powerproject. And at checkout, enter promo code POWERPROJECT to save 10% off any one of these panels or any lab on the entire website. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
It's really difficult to not want to prove yourself.
Well,
we have these methods. I feel great about them. They're working really great. Everyone in your school feels amazing about it.
Well, I mean, I've already proven myself. I still have tons of work to do, don't get me wrong, but what other small, non-affiliated, single-focused gym that has a competition team under 20 people that are producing the results that I am? Nobody. So fine, and I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. You can ask him right now, sitting here, what I do, how dedicated I am to what I do. So there's a reason why I'm having these results. Okay, it's not an accident. So anyway, no, I'm not. I don't need to prove myself to them. I need to prove myself to them because they're the ones who give me their trust and their work and their effort. Not the people talking shit. Fuck them.
How about you, Deandre? Do you feel like, because like you are, when people think about like standard and competition, you're the first guy that I think a lot of people think about. Along with obvious, you have a lot of other great students, but that's also you, right? I think there's a podcast where the title is The Sword. Oh, yeah. Right? So what do you feel when you're heading into these places? Do you feel like there's a target on your back?
I mean, I don't feel like there's a target on me personally, man. I'm just doing my part as an athlete. My job as an athlete is to do whatever in my power is to get ready for each practice every day and get ready for the day of performance. And that's what I try to focus on most times. I know it's sometimes I try to stay away from the comments and the Reddits and stuff, but that's what I'm really focused on. I don't really feel like there's a target on my back, and everybody even the competitors I've competed against and interacted with, I've always had cordial and respectful interactions. A lot of that stuff is online.
It's online.
Yeah. But I just focus on trying to be an athlete, and that's what my job in this gym. That's my job as an athlete, is to get ready for practice, be as ready as possible for practice. That means sleeping, eating right, doing whatever I have to do S&C wise to stay ready, and most importantly, probably more importantly, is getting ready for that day. And I think that's where most of my attention goes.
I think being defensive or reactionary, in any way, is hard to do with any sort of tact. And then also to the person, delivering the mean message or whatever it is, you're not going to, it's impossible. You're just not going to be able to convince them of anything. They have their jiu-jitsu class that they go to and their instructor's right. And you guys don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I'm really okay with that ultimately, but I do like to throw shit. And so again, my guys remind me, honestly, it's really good for me to be around him sometimes because he's a disciplined person. And so, especially when I'm in competition, when I'm out there with my guys, I can't even handle myself. Like I feel like I'm about to fight. And so he reminded me, like, no, it was really good because like sometimes it gets in the way, right? And so it was cool. Like at West Coast, he looked at me and was like,
look,
and I'm like,
no. It's like, I remember, I'll tell a story, like this last trials run, and we are trying to qualify for trials, you know, in 2023 during the East Coast trials, my brother and I were feeling pretty confident on getting the ticket. You know, we were like, oh, this is our year because we did all these ADCC Opens, we were winning them all. And then I fell short in the round of 16. And, that's hard for me. Like, all right. However, my brother is still in the bracket, and he still has a chance to go. And, it was hard for the whole team to kind of watch me fall off. And they had the confidence in me as well. And like, but there's a job not done still. My brother Gavin, he's still in the bracket. We can still win this. And that was one of the things that we kind of talked about going into the West Coast trials. Like, take one match at a time until the job is done. Let's stay focused. I want to be an athlete. You're going to be a coach, and we're gonna continue to do this. And that's our breakout tournament. That's the one where I qualified. Me and my brother ends up competing in the semifinal. He ends up taking his third place match. So we're both on the podium.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that was, and like back to like he was saying, it's communication between athlete and coach. I think having that good, relationship is very important. It's probably more important than any of the approaches or drilling.
For sure.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, you look at professional sports, you see it time and time again. There's for every Tom Brady, there's a guy that we haven't heard of, right?
Right.
Tom Brady's like selected in like the 7th round or whatever, and he happened to be linked up with a good coach and good circumstances. And the way that a coach and an athlete come together is really important. It's a huge factor.
Well, and what's crazy about being a coach a little bit, because you're considered a leader, right? So you don't have anybody helping you. And so, when I talk to a young athlete, and 4 years prior, I promise him that I'll do everything in my power to get him to where he's going, and he falls, it's not on him, it's on me. And so I had never experienced that emotion like that before. And like, I didn't know how to handle it. Like, it was like devastating, because all I could think about is like, man, I didn't do enough. And for some reason, it was so overwhelming to me that I couldn't focus anymore. It's just, when you see an athlete give everything they have every day, and I literally mean everything, and it doesn't work out, it's like, fuck, you know what I mean? And that I just wasn't used to that. And so when it happened, it was a big thing for me. But then afterwards, we talked, we had a conversation, and I had to refocus myself as a coach and become better, emotionally more resilient to the risks that we were taking when we're out there. And so that's something I had to learn too. Just like athletes are learning how to perform and learning how to prepare, coaches do too.
That's an interesting thing though, man, because like a lot of times you don't hear coaches communicating with their athletes in that way and being open in that way and showing where like kind of you have a place of improvement, right? Did you see that a lot from coaches, or have you just learned that from being a better coach?
No, I think it's kind of the way I view things. I don't have anyone to help me. Like, It was funny. Like, when he won West Coast, I was as calm as I'd ever been. Like, I wasn't even I didn't get emotional until Rob Wilson called me. Like, because I had no one to talk to. So when I was stressing myself out over 4 years, I had no one to talk to. I couldn't unload. And his strength conditioning coach became my friend. And he was the one that was keeping me steady, And nobody called me. The phone rang, I looked, and it was him. And like, for some reason, as soon as I answered the phone, I cried like a little bitch, a little baby, you know what I'm saying? And it was like, I'm serious though, because it was like all that stress and having someone there to actually hear what you're going through. Because as a coach, I can't load it on him. He's got to be an athlete. He's got to worry about what he's got to do. Yeah, we can hug each other and have our emotions afterwards, but I'm not his responsibility. He's mine. You know what I'm saying?
Could Louis Simmons the situation a little bit and talk shit about him to his brother and so on. That's what Louis would do. Louis would he liked to like kick stuff up a little bit. And
no, I don't need that. They go to battle.
They're already killing each other.
Yeah, me and my brother.
You guys started on the same day. You and your brother started jiu-jitsu like when you were 13, you said?
Yeah, I was like 13, he was 9, and we started the same day and training ever since.
What got you into it?
So I originally had started doing Muay Thai. I'm originally from Virginia Beach. There was a gym there, and it was close to my house. And they also offered a jiu-jitsu program, and we decided to go do that. And after the first practice, man, it was like, dude, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
Let's go compete. And then after that, we were like the same. I think a month or two later, after we started, we just started competing, and we competed like, I think that first year, like twice a month for like a whole year.
Built-in training partner.
Yeah, that's my brother. That's my brother right there.
That you get to talk to all day about jiu-jitsu stuff.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. I was telling Nsima, it's like a cheat code. You know, there's a reason why you see a lot of brother duos in jiu-jitsu. They take it to the, you know, the high level. You know,
I mean, who's going to push you like your blood? You know what I mean?
like I talk about it all the time. There's a less, you know, when you get training partners, you could go hard, but there's always that little filter. Like, you know, we're not to push that hard. But when you got a brother, it's like that filter is almost non-existent. You just go as hard as you want. You know.
I want to ask you this, man. You mentioned that when you were going to Standard, you were traveling 3 hours to train.
Yeah.
How long did you do that, and how many days a week were you training while traveling 3 hours to get there?
So like the first year at Standard. So the real reason why I went to Standard, how I even met Greg, is my girlfriend. My girlfriend was training at Standard. She's my wife now.
Oh, wow.
So that's why, like, everything kind of works out in a weird way. Yeah. So it was right before the pandemic. I had a job lined up in Virginia Beach, like 3 hours away from Rockville, where we're currently located. And I remember, like, because I had that job, I couldn't move there full time. So I was just seeing my girlfriend on the weekends, and then I would go to training and I would watch them train, right? And because it was COVID, it was kind of weird because we don't want a visitor training, right? But that completely, like, if I'm coming there every weekend, he was like, all right, come on the mat. And like, then I started really like training with the guys, and that's when I started learning about the approach. So I was doing that for like a year, I think. Yeah. So like I would drive up Friday after work and go train Friday open mat, then Saturday session, Sunday session, drive back home Sunday night. And then whatever games or anything I learned at Standard, I would go home and do it with my brother, train it with my brother. And I would go like work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you know, had my regular day job. And then I would do it all over again. Drive back Friday, Saturday, Sunday, come back. I did that for about a year. Wow. And one of the things was like, because I just got that job back where I was from, it's like I had to stay there for a certain amount of time. But during that time, I was looking for like work up in the DC area so I can make the full-time move. And I think I did that in like the end of 2021. So about a year and a half of just driving up every weekend, doing the 3 hours. And you know what's funny? I was the first one to do it, but we have a couple guys doing that now. Like coming from like one of my main training partners, Sid, he's like the next guy to actually make the permanent move to Maryland to train with us. Yeah, wow. He was crashing on my couch because one of the things I wanted was like, if anyone wanted to do the same thing I did, they needed a place to stay. So I made him crash on my couch, and he was a great training partner. And then, you know, after a couple months, or like I think what was he doing it for like a year? He made the full move, and he's living there now. So yeah, I did that for like a year, traveling and just driving, a lot of hair pulling. It's like,
it's actually not hard to drive that far when it's for a woman. So Greg, he didn't drive that far for you.
I know, that's what I'm about to say. Here's what's interesting, right? So little Alex was until him, she argues that she still is now, is our most successful student. So little Alex was the first kid that I ever taught. Like her dad just like dropped her off with me when she was 13 years old. Wow. She would follow me around, this little 13-year-old. And so she'd be with me from 4:30 till 9 o'clock every day. And so I ended up actually taking her in. I got legal guardianship when she was a teenager and took her in for a few years and helped her kind of get her life started. But either way, she, juvenile 1 and 2 world champ, purple belt world champ, brown belt world champ, a black belt world champ, or not brown belt. She lost brown belt, but again, this is gi and no gi. So she was like my first promotions, my first world champion. She was like everything. And so when she told me that she's like, Coach Greg, I'm interested in Deandre Corbe. I was like, go get him right now. because I knew who he was, because I had seen him as a kid, because I was on Team Lord Irvin. He used to fight the Team Lord Irvin kids. And I used to, and I trained with him and his brother. Like, it was just this random story. I saw him rolling on a mat years ago, and I was like, hey, can I train with you guys? And they were like small. He was like 18. Dad was 14, but they were like small.
I didn't know who he was.
And so we had this weird history because we grew up in the same area.
Yeah.
Like even our original instructors knew each other.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was just really cool story. So I was like, yeah, Alex, go get him. And she's like, all right. And then so she brought him up, introduced him, and then
Now y'all are married.
Yeah, it's funny how all that kind of lined up, man. It's like the reason why I was going up to standard is because like beginning of COVID, I had a job lined up, but they were pushing like the start date back. So I was just like, I had all the time in the world, and I would just go up to Maryland, spend a couple weeks there, and then just train. And then like, I'm seeing this girl, and then I'm also like building relationships with the guys in the gym. Like, oh, I like these guys are cool. I like what they're doing here. And then it just happened like that. And then I made the move. And then 2 years, man, not even 2 years, a year later, once my brother graduated, he moved up too. So now it's just a good, like I said, good culture in the gym. A lot of guys aligned with the same mission. And I think that plays a lot of the, plays a big part of my success,
I think on our last show, Greg, I asked you something along the lines of, does anything in terms of the way this training is structured, does it change the wear and tear on anybody's body? Because I know obviously that I definitely want us to get into S&C stuff because you're doing a lot of really cool stuff with Rob. But the way of training, does it benefit the athlete's longevity in any way?
For sure.
How so?
Variation. And I said this last time, and because we can grapple every day, but we don't have to do the same movement patterns every day. So I think it's not the grappling itself every day that hurts you, but how you approach grappling every day that hurts you.
Yeah.
So we can change volume, we can change intensity, we can change movement pattern, we can change all these things without not grappling. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the freedom there. We can pull levers, levers that a lot of people don't know are actually there. You know what I mean? Like if you were to ask a typical coach, well, how do you control intensity in a room? They wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, not a big secret. I tell everyone, you control intensity with complexity, time, partner selection, right? And so we can use those things as ways to manipulate the things that could hurt us if we didn't know how to manipulate them.
I want to add on to that. Something that's really cool about that is like, again, grappler, think about your game. Think about the way you're pulling and pushing with your specific game. When your body's doing that same pushing and pulling pattern every day when you're sparring multiple times a week, and that's the pattern you go to, you're going to have certain types of strengths within your skeleton and also weaknesses because you're always going in one direction. So there's going to be certain parts of your tissues that are much tighter than others because that's where you always go.
For sure.
But if what you're saying, you force this variation, you force different movement and different creativity, right?
Absolutely. Like, let's say, for example, and also too, because we also need to get different skills to emerge for different reasons. Like, let's say D goes out to a tournament and he gets outside passed, right? Someone goes around to the legs. And we don't have anyone in the gym that outside passes. Guess what we're doing?
Outside passing.
Outside passing. I don't care if you're good at it or not. That's what we're doing today. And so we get to experiment with all these different ways to approach solving the problem, all this variation. And it's sort of a built-in protective mechanism for overuse injury. And so as long as you're paying attention as a coach and you know which levers to pull, you can help prevent the things that you're asking about.
Gotcha. How many of these games would you do in one session?
It depends on, when you say games, it just depends. So for the basic class, we do 6 6s. So we have 6-minute rounds, generally 6 different situations we put them in. For the advanced guys, it could be that same thing, or it could be 4 10s, or you can manipulate it however you want. It's just how much. So the thing is, I try to optimize the hour. If I have 1 hour to train, what the hell do we do in that 1 hour? And we can split it up a bunch of different ways, but how we use time, how we use partner selection, how we use task complexity or simplification will determine the outcomes we get.
And that all changes, like, depending where we're at in the week, where we're at in like the competition schedule. And then we could pull those levers to kind of make sure that we're not only still developing the skills we want, but also making sure we're recovered. That's a big thing,
Yeah, since the last time you were here, I think it was like you were here, and then maybe like a month later, I was in Tahoe, and I went into a commercial gym, and then I saw like these mats and stuff, and I'm like, just kind of looking, and I'm like, I think I know that guy. And it was Chris, who's over there in the corner. It was his place where he's training people utilizing your methods. And so I went over to him and talked to him for a second, and I was like, this seems awesome. This is really cool. Because I met him I met him at Super Training. He came when you came because he wanted to kind of check out the show and stuff and get to meet you and all that. And he was like, well, he's like, if you want, there's a class in like 15 minutes. So I do that to people all the time.
Yeah.
I screw people over like that all the time with running and different things. And
Kratom.
So he Kratom. He Mark Belled me to death there. And I was like, well, I'm here and I basically have no choice. So I did the class, and it was, I would say that it was awesome in comparison to other jiu-jitsu I've been exposed to, which is a tiny amount. And I've only done like 4 or 5 jiu-jitsu classes in my life, and that was one of them. So I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I found it to be more fun. I found it to be like more exciting, and then it was also like very taxing, like very quickly.
Oh, for sure.
And we were at altitude too, but I was like, holy shit, this gets to be really difficult really fast.
Well, what's interesting is people try to separate skill and capacity. So like, oh, this is techniques or skill work, and you got to build your capacities elsewhere. Now, there's a reason to build capacity elsewhere, but what's wrong with utilizing an hour where a new player is learning how to be physical while also developing some foundational skills? I think that we should marry those things. Like, performance and training really are the same thing if we were to like talk about it. So yeah, so that's the good thing, right? You get tired because you don't have the capacity to train for an hour yet.
I just couldn't believe how hard it was. It was just so dumb. I'm like, this is stupid. Like, it can't be that hard to push somebody, but they won't let you push them. Let me push you, goddammit. I can't, you're trying to, I think the other opponent was like just sitting on the ground and I was standing, and then we switched, but I was like, this shouldn't be that hard. Why is this hard? I mean, it was infuriating.
It's funny.
As strong as you are, dude.
I could see why it would be addicting though, too. Because you're like, I want to figure this out. I want to solve
engaging.
this.
It's engaging, It's like, and that's one thing, that's a thing I like about the approach is it's always engaging. Because the moment you stop, you have a lapse in focus or you're not engaged, you're losing the game. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. Like, there's a lot, when I used to come up, me and my brother were in our previous gym, we were kind of just like coaching ourselves. We're doing what we would think got us better drilling. I remember we'd drill, put the clock on, drill this whatever pass. We'd zone out and just do the motions, and we thought that was what was getting us good.
Yeah.
You can't zone out in our practice.
Yeah, you can't, because you'll lose the game. Yeah.
Let me ask you this in the vein, because one thing. With someone who has never done jiu-jitsu before, it might look kind of fun, and jiu-jitsu is fun, right? But you're mentioning the drilling, kind of just like zoning out. And when I see some people train, like they look like they are working. And when I say working, I know we're like, ooh, we just want to have fun, but like they don't look like they're enjoying the practice anymore.
So I just got, because people accuse him of that, and that's what actually frustrates me.
Accuse him of what?
Not having fun.
Okay.
And I'm like, yo, D likes to be serious. Chill the fuck out, right? So like,
it's just my personal disposition. Not everybody's like that, but when I'm focused, like I'm locked in. I'm not thinking about anything else until the hour is up. And that's how I like to practice. That's how I like to strength train. That's how I like to do any of my conditioning. Just get in that state where I'm playing the role of this.
I have a question for you. Even though you're serious, does it feel like play or not?
I mean, I'm just playing hard. Just playing hard, man. That's when you're playing video games, the most fun part of the video game. That's when it's most fun. That's what I like. And not everybody's like that, but that's what I like. I promise you I like it. I promise you I like the practice.
Look, you can't withstand what he's doing if you don't like it. Like, his joy is what allows him to do what he does. And I think all of us, and that's the thing I like about the culture I've built at my gym, is that we kind of all are like that. We all have different personalities. Like, we have a young kid, Sid, who is serious in his training, but he's always relaxed about how serious he is.
Yeah.
But he always tries. And that's what's interesting. He can be like sort of light and jovial, but also kicking ass, And then where D's just more quiet. It doesn't mean he's not having fun, but he locks in a different way. And we're all different, you know what I mean? But we all think hard, serious training is a good time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. For years on this podcast, we've been talking about the benefit of barefoot shoes. And these are the shoes I used to use back in like 2017, 2018, my old Metcons. They are flat, but they're not very wide, and they're very stiff and they don't move. That's why we've been partnering with and we've been using Vivo barefoot shoes. These are the Modus Strength shoe, because not only are they wide, I have wide ass feet, and so do we here on the podcast, especially as our feet have gotten stronger, but they're flexible. So when you're doing certain movements, like let's say you're doing jumping or you're doing split squats or you're doing movements where your toes need to flex and move, your feet are able to do that and perform in this shoe, allowing them to get stronger over time. And obviously, they're flexible. So your foot's allowed to be a foot. And when you're doing all types of exercise, your feet will get stronger, improving your ability to move. Andrew, how can they get their hands on these?
Yes, head to vivobarefoot.com/powerproject and enter the code that you see on screen to save 20% off your entire order. Again, that's at vivobarefoot.com/powerproject. Links in the description as well as the podcast show notes.
You know, you're mentioning you and your brother sort of like coaching yourselves. And I think it's, I could have this quote wrong from Einstein, but I think he said something to the effect of creativity is more important than knowledge. But there's like, the quote is kind of messed up because you can't have creativity without the knowledge. And so like, you know, if you're like, it doesn't make, not that it's harmful, well, maybe it is harmful, but not that it's probably not the best idea to coach yourself. You could coach yourself after you start to begin to have like more knowledge, and it probably makes more sense over time.
Well, I think
but you still have to have some sort of knowledge base of some sort. Otherwise, you know, you and your brother might just been like killing each other all the time. Someone could have got seriously hurt and so forth. Not that you wouldn't get better at fighting. You'd probably still get better at fighting, but maybe the sport of jiu-jitsu would need more of like fine tuning, I think. What would be, some the way you guys think about it?
So I get, when I say coaching ourselves, it wasn't really like we put gis on unsupervised, and when we had our original instructor Nestor Bayat in Virginia Beach, he gave us all our fundamentals, but the thing he gave us was once we got to a certain skill level, he gave us freedom. So that's where that creativity part. So we had this knowledge base, but then he noticed that we were really dedicated and we really wanted to push like developing the skill. So he gave us a key. And it's like we were in the gym and we're like we're there all the time, and that's what I mean by we are coaching. So like, so it kind of fits into what you were saying. Like, you know, we had the basic knowledge of what grappling is, right, from our introduction, and then when we really wanted to take it to that next level, he gave us freedom to explore. You know, that's the thing.
I think of the opposite. I think creativity comes first, because if you think about the learning process, I always think about children. Like, you want them to engage regardless of how it looks. Like, when I think about like kids learning basketball, I don't think about kids playing basketball. I think about kids holding this round ball and pushing each other and like trying to throw it and laughing and falling, and like that's what I think learning looks like. Because knowledge is ad hoc, it's after the fact, it comes later. So when the kid starts to make a transition to actually develop skill, that's where a knowledgeable coach becomes necessary. But all early play starts with desire and interest and fun. If you don't have that, you don't have skill.
A funny athlete who I think I want to like mention here. Not many people watch basketball here, but LaMelo Ball. You guys ever heard of LaMelo Ball?
I don't watch sports, man.
Yeah, I don't really watch basketball. I watch highlights. But LaMelo was he's one of the Ball brothers, and he's the youngest of them. And when he came into the NBA, everyone was like, just like how could this guy make it in the NBA? His shooting form is off. He just did everything like he was playing a video game. That's how he played in high school. That's his dad just taught him how to play basketball by having fun. So he'd let him shoot from half court. He'd let him do that in high school games. And now he's doing that in the NBA with like non-traditional fundamentals. This guy's pulling up from like close to half court all the time, just like doing this weird shit because of the way he learned how to play the game, having fun with his brothers.
But why is fundamental always considered an aesthetic? Like, why do I have to shoot like this guy? If it goes in the hole, who cares if you're doing it underhand? Who gives a shit, right? Like, you want the ball to go in as consistently as possible in the face of pressure. If you can do that, who cares?
It doesn't matter how it looks, you know. You're scoring. That's all that matters, you know?
So, sorry, I just wanted to bring up this question because, like, this happens to me all the time. Again, like a traditional class, but like, let's say me and Josh are rolling, and he'll do something to get past my guard, like without even any effort. I'll be like, "Whoa, shit, dude, what did you do?" And I'll ask him to kind of redo that, and then I'll try to mimic it. Does that happen a lot with your guys' approach?
In a way, but not like, oh, what did you do? I think, and you can ask D this, I think I've created a culture and an understanding at my gym where we already know sort of what's happening early on. So we don't have the confused player. Like, by the time you get a blue belt, in my gym, You know how to play the game. So it's not a surprise, but it doesn't mean we don't discuss things that are happening. Let's say D does a cool transition from one thing to another thing. And it's like, oh man, I noticed that, your grip was here and it made me feel like this. Like, what were you trying to do? And then we sit around and bullshit about it. And he sits down with the guys all the time and talks about what he's thinking, what he's feeling, what he's focused on. And this creates inspiration to maybe look at things and try things differently. Showing, mimicry, communication. This is all part of the natural human environment. It must be done. What we are avoiding is the stereotypical, process-driven, explanatory nonsense that really doesn't have any place in learning. But it doesn't mean we can't discuss and show things.
Right. Like, it was funny. Like, I had a similar situation just happen like a couple of days ago in training where someone asked me, like, what did I do? Like, what did I do? And the thing about after being at Standard for a couple of years is, I think if you would have asked me a couple of years ago, I would have said, oh, I put my hand here, I did this, I give you a step list, right? But now it's more like, these were the effects I'm trying to create. I told the person that was asking me, these are the tasks that I was trying to create or complete, or the conditions I was trying to maintain. It wasn't a sequence of steps, And then once you break it down into like tasks and maintaining certain conditions, that's actually pretty applicable next time you're engaging in a similar situation. We're like, all right, I'm just going to keep my legs on the inside, for example, right? For when we're passing, I'm going to try to keep control of the inside as opposed to like step here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it really does. The verbiage transit or change is going to be like the biggest takeaway there.
Can I interrupt for a second? Just so there's no right and wrong way in that example of keeping someone's leg in that same position. There's as long as you keep their leg in that position, you're good.
Conditional, yeah. It's like if I can maintain this condition, and this is where like subject matter expertise comes in when you're talking to your coach. Is like, when someone knows the grappling environment, we could make like statements about invariant things, like certain conditions. Like we know inside control is better than not having inside control, for example. I'm probably butchering that, but that's an example of trying to maintain a condition as opposed to trying to tell them, put my leg here at this time. It allows for more play there.
What's funny is like when you hear some of the traditional guys who like and sell the DVDs and they're so confident in their weird explanation. Like I challenge you guys all, like grab a DVD and watch just a simple, they're like, okay, well then what I do is I put my shin here. And when they do this, I tend to do this, but then if they don't do that, then I do this. So what I'm really doing is I'm waiting for either move. And when I see this move, I'm smoked. I'm like, what? Has any of you guys, do you guys operate like that?
I mean, yeah, it's like you'll get this reaction, and when that happens, then you're gonna do this different whatever move or whatever.
There's like an infinite like layering of reactions that you got to be prepared for, and then eventually, when whoever gets tired is gonna lose the exchange. Yeah. But if you just think about it more like as maintaining certain conditions, is like, like that's applicable. I could do that immediately, and I don't have to think about 10 steps.
I think there's an old wrestling video game where like you would hit the guy and like stun him, and then it would be like paused, and then you could select what you wanted to do next, and you had to like try to get to it really quick.
If I could do that.
Well, that's oh man, that would be amazing.
It sounds like what you're referencing, like it's the dictionary or Rolodex of information that you have.
Yeah, I always called it the infinite if this then that, right?
Yeah.
Like if this then that, and if this then that, but with that approach, it literally never ends because I don't know like how to get to the end goal.
What's even more fascinating is they say that, but you never see it. Get any one of those DVDs, watch their explanation, all 8 hours of it, and watch their match. They might struggle to just make a connection for 10 minutes. It's like, wait, I just bought your DVD for $200 and you showed me that if then 100 different ways and you showed it with confidence and smoothness and your drill looks amazing. But I just watched your last match and you got stuck belly up kicking your feet at the top player until you won by decision. So where's your DVD? You know what I mean? And it's like, anyway, we just need a better way.
Let's pull this up, Mark.
Yeah. I want to get your take on this. See what you guys think.
That dude makes me feel kind of scared.
This guy's juiced up and it's just unfair.
My whole life. I'll start a match with the people on steroids and I'll be like, what the fuck? He feels like a rock. Like their bodies just feel like super solid, right? But then I think about Dan Gable. He's like one of my idols, and he talks about those people that cheat and take shortcuts. And I never cheated or took a shortcut. So I have a stronger mind than all those people. So I knew that if I use my mind against theirs, my mind is always going to be stronger than theirs, you know? So I always overcame those people my whole career in jiu-jitsu. And it made it even more special to me knowing that those people are all cheating. But at the same time, I can't stay quiet about that, you know, because if I stay quiet about that, then it's just going to continue. It's just going to continue. So I feel like that's a test from God to me that I see bad. And do I stay quiet just to have more friends in my life? Or do I speak up, have more enemies, more people hating me? But I can make a difference. So that's why I talk about this. That's why I say this.
Man,
Are you supposed to comment on that?
By the way, Mikey Musumeci, I remember watching him when I was a purple. He's a freaking savage.
He is.
He's a savage, dude. Yeah. I don't know what he was talking about there, but it's like the steroids.
Yeah, because he just got done the UFC Fight Pass. But how do you feel like with especially Nogi, everything's go?
Yeah.
Right? How do you guys handle that?
Well, he's the competitor that has to touch those guys. So
I mean, I know the quote he's talking about. I think Dan Gable was talking about the Russians. Yeah, and then there was like it makes them mentally weak or something like that. You know, my take on it is, you know, I'm on the live and let live, because the more like if you're I don't know, like if it's not against the rules in this thing, it's like you do what you could want to do.
It's not tested for.
Yeah, it's
in
not.
no
It's not. So it's
competition.
not against the in certain competitions. It's not against the rules.
So in that case, it's not. It may not be necessarily cheating.
Right. So
Since it's not against the
my
rules.
problem is if you're doing something where there's a tested event and it's against the rules, right? If it's against the rules, like, and you break the rules, now that's where my problem. You're lying. You're cheating.
Yeah.
Right. But if there's not, like, you know, do as you please. You know, hopefully you educate yourself before you do anything with putting anything in your body. That's the biggest thing. In terms of, I don't want people hurting their health. But if that's what you want to do, that's you. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mikey's thing though is that it maybe isn't really what the younger athletes want to do, but coaches are like saying like, hey, like this is the path. And then, I mean, we've seen the videos of some young Brazilian kids and it's like, dude, that you got some massive gyno and you're barely getting started, right? So that's where Mikey's like, dude, like we should not be promoting this. We shouldn't be joking about this. Right. This is a serious issue when you have, you know, established coaches that are like saying, hey, like take this and, you know, you're going to do a lot better.
That's a problem in itself. Is like you're manipulating young athletes that don't necessarily have the education behind what they're putting in their body, and that's the problem. You know, you know, before like I take any supplement or do any training protocol, like I want to understand what the potential effects are, and that should be the same for stuff like that. And then you're to tell that to someone that really doesn't have a like understanding of it. That's potentially like detrimental health, future health too.
Yeah, I don't really see anything wrong with it. I'm sorry, like I just don't. You know, if I was talking to a young athlete, I would get him as far away from it as I can because there's so much other stuff we need to maximize. Yeah, you know what I mean. There's so much other things we have to do to get you better, get you healthy, get you motivated. There's so many things going on. Now, performance enhancing drugs, they do exactly that. I've touched people who are on them. He's absolutely right. They feel strong as fuck. Yeah,
I've touched people that are on them and I cooked them. Yeah, you know, it's like, so it's not the like skill is number one. It's like I know this is not the field I'm in, but like the professional bodybuilding, it's not like you can't lift weight. You take those, but you still got to lift. You still got to, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, for sure. But, yeah. So what I'm trying to say is like skill is number one there, you know. And the guys who take it, they probably train more than the guys who don't. So are they really cheating? They can, they can. So they have greater capacity to act. And so I mean, I can see the value. It doesn't mean that I think that it should be culturally accepted and something that we should all do, but there's value. Yeah. If it's against the rules, don't do it because you're cheating. For sure. You know no, I agree. I'm just assuming that. Yeah.
All right, well, let's jump into your strength and conditioning. What's that looking like right now?
So right now, I don't got anything on the schedule. So I'm doing 2 days of just some general physical preparedness works like lifting, basic hypertrophy, basic strength, 2 days of conditioning, and then 2 days designated to mobility. That's on top of like my 1 a day.
Do you grow pretty easily? Do you have to pay attention to that for weight classes or anything?
I do like to eat. Yeah. So I was just talking.
I mean, I'm just looking at your neck and your traps. I'm like, this guy looks like he could put on some muscle really fast.
I mean,
Strong as fuck too.
I mean,
it looks like it.
I definitely have to monitor that, especially if like ADCC when I was competing, it was like 66 kilos, which is 145. I walk around probably like 65, 170 off season away from it.
Yeah.
You know, and I definitely have to monitor that. But yeah, I grow relatively quick. But I never really get past 170-ish, 175. I can't really get past that.
You know, we were talking in the gym about like where you started with S&C and like how long you've been training and kind of like how's that evolution been for you?
The S&C?
Yeah.
So I think my brother and I really started exploring it. You know, I would say our first introduction was like our high school wrestling coach got us in the weight room, right? And then we started learning the basic lifts. And then we were talking about it earlier. We were listening to a podcast and they were talking about Charles Poliquin.
Yeah.
I said, oh man, that's me and my brother were like, we had at the time we had that's where all our money went to, like the bare minimum we were making. It's like, oh, let's go try to get stronger, you know. And so we went down that route and we learned a lot about, you know, one of the most important things I probably learned was like structural balance, keeping the body just kind of balanced out, because anybody that practices jiu-jitsu, they know that's you're gonna overcompensate in certain areas. So that was the main thing. We wanted to make sure that we were staying resilient so we could continue to practice. And then I did that for like a couple years. And me and my brother were really on trying to get super strong. And then we noticed that there was some diminishing return on just lifting that way. And just like we were under the barbell probably like 5 or 6 times a week. Like
you said you were like one something and front squatting something wild.
I was like, I remember my first conversation with Rob, my current strength and conditioning coach. Like I told him like, yeah, I was like 152 pounds and I was like front squatting like 320. And I was like, and he's like, and you know, and we talked about this. The first thing he said, I thought he was gonna be like, "Whoa, that's strong." It's like, and he was like, "Why?" And, you know, and it makes total. It makes total sense because you know, my brother and I, you know, putting effort in that area. We were convinced that this was gonna get us strong, which it did. But was it the best way to go about our time off the mat? You know. Nowadays, you know, I talk to Rob. He makes sure I'm managing volume, and now that I built that strength early on, it's more really like what is the minimal effective dose for whatever goal we're after. You know, whether that be absolute strength or you know maintaining some hypertrophy as the season goes on, which is important, I think. Yeah, and then or conditioning, you know, or some like one of the things I try to develop this past year was like some power and power endurance, because one of the things I do when I train, I'm not very fast and like dynamic. I'm very rigid and structured for long periods of time. So I'm strong and I could go for a long time. So but my brother on the other hand, he has like this powerful speed, dynamic movement. And that was one of the things I try to develop. And so I converse with Rob on that and try to find a way where I could still keep skill work high. I see that's where the money's at, or that's where you pay the bills, right? How can I keep my mat time high and still kind of, you know, progress that power and that you know, the power and power endurance without smoking myself. I'm not gonna go under the barbell and do like 20 singles for a power clean and think that's gonna smoke me. You know, I'm not gonna do that. The thing I talk with Rob about is how do I manage that outside stuff to keep me on the mat. Yeah.
So Rob Wilson has also become my strength conditioning coach, helped me in my old age not be a cripple, and so I can still grapple with these cats. But yeah, it's his big thing, right? He's writing this book, The Check Engine Light. His company is Prepared to Perform, and the whole thing with him is trying to merge performance and health together, because really we know that performance ultimately is unhealthy. I mean, if we dig too deep into the specifics of things, we get kind of specific, right? And that could be deleterious to the rest of our lives. And so he's really trying to find those lines. Which levers do we pull at which times to create which effects? And he's very good at merging those two things together. So, you know, I've been grateful to know him, and he's helped Deke a ton. So
he's been my strength and conditioning coach since before I moved to standard, you know, when I was in the gi and competing in the IBJJF.
You were telling me some things in the gym about like, you know, rather than just having you spam barbell movements, right? He was having you do certain things as far as gymnastics for your tendon strength.
Yeah.
Like he was having you, it kind of makes me think about the way that you guys were talking about training. Like, you know that there's a hook and this is what this hook does. So you know that there's something you can do and this is what it does rather than just training to train, you know?
Where we, you know, I think in the SNC world, you're after certain adaptations, certain outcomes.
Yep.
But does that mean you have to do this specific way to get that outcome? Are there ways that you could preserve your body and still get the outcome you want? And that's why I delegate all that stuff to Rob, because he's the expert in that, you know. You know.
You're doing like med ball stuff and plyos and all kinds of stuff like that.
Right. Like for example, one of the things is like if I'm preparing for something, right, like a specific date, and I'm not versed in the Olympic lifts, because Olympic lifts are great in developing power, right?
Technical.
Yeah, exactly, but very, very technical. Am I gonna spend 3 weeks trying to get technical, or can I just get a med ball and just throw that thing or slam that thing as hard as I can? I'm still getting the adaptation I want for power development, but I don't need to get super technical getting under a barbell. You know what I'm saying? It's remember, sports performance. The sport is what we're trying to get ready for. You know, so
you're probably still squatting and deadlifting, but maybe different versions of it.
Right.
Maybe like a hex bar deadlift or something like that. Right.
Hex bar. You know, Zercher squatting. That's one of my, I started liking that a lot.
I love Zerchers,
It's like Zercher squatting, Zercher split squats, you know, like that's like introductions to the exercise selection makes a huge difference, because, you know, the way you're loading a barbell on you, right? Like a straight bar deadlift or a hex bar, the load on your spine, which in turn like kind of like affects your CNS for later that day, plays a role. Like if I have a lift in the morning and I have the training in the afternoon, how can I get the outcome I want without frying myself for training, you know?
Yeah, and real heavy lifts can tend to they make you kind of slow. Like I know that like over time they can make you actually faster because you can be stronger, but they make you slow like the next couple days, like getting out of bed and like, you know, just little stuff. And it's like, how can you walk around slow and then go to practice and be efficient?
Right. Like that's a Charles Poliquin quote, fatigue mass fitness, you know, like imagine like you build this level of fatigue or this fatigue debt, we call it the fatigue debt, where you can't repay it. And you're like just smoked. And now your skill work is suffering. And that's the thing that you were really after. It's a real like that's why I go to Rob, man. It's like it's a real fine, like really nuanced thing to kind of dive into. And for me as an athlete, like when we were getting ready for like a big tournament, I'm giving him like certain metrics to show him like a peek into where I'm at, like physiologically. Like
I have a question for you.
No, I was going to say, Rob came up with like kind of an ingenious thing, and it actually helped me as a coach too, is D had 3 objective metrics and 3 subjective metrics that he had to measure every day. And those were sent to me. So I would read them in the morning, see where he was at. But it's not just the day. The day doesn't matter. It's the means over time. And I could decide, okay, which lever am I going to pull today? Are we going to do long, continuous connected games for 6 minutes? Or are we going to do terminal games for 10 minutes? Does he need to work with his brother today? Or does he need to work with, you know, Josh today, right? So those metrics allowed me to read him. And it released the burden of him coming to me going, Coach, man, I'm feeling like this today. It was actual data. That if I understood him as an athlete, that I could use to help his skill practice be more effective in the face of his strength and conditioning.
And you think about it is like, imagine like having to, it takes, like he said, it takes that burden away from me. Like I don't want to like tell him that I can't do. You have to change practice because the data was going straight to him. The practice was already designed without me having to touch it, because I knew he was looking out for what is best for performance, you know?
Yeah. You're 29. You've been doing the martial art for 15 years. I know that some people, you know, a lot of people like will stop competing early because like certain injuries that have happened, and sometimes these things are unfortunate. How do you feel that your body's continuing to feel? Because you've been doing this for a long time, right? Do you feel good?
I mean,
wear and tear?
Right now, I definitely feel good. Best I've ever felt. But I know my training volume is not the same as it was when I was 20 or 19, 18, right? But I'm glad that I did educate myself somewhat on that, because when that time does, like right now, when like 28, 29, 30, 31, I have like some like agency over that. You know, I could change the volume, I could change whatever lever I need to change to maximally perform. You know? And I think as I got older, like I said, 5 years ago, when I first got the standard, we're doing 10 rounds, every 10 minute rounds, or 10-minute rounds every day.
But we agreed to this, by the way. This wasn't just imposed.
Well, it's a personal experiment too. It's like, see where your max volume truly is, and then from there you could dial it back. You know, and then I was educated on that. You know, working with Rob, and it's great because my volume now is not 10 by 10 anymore. But am I performing better? I feel like I'm performing better. You know, in terms of what I'm doing on the mat.
How is this stuff feeling for you? This strength and conditioning and doing explosive work, and like how are your joints and elbows and shoulders and stuff?
Fantastic. I mean, like, you know, nobody tells you what it's like to be 40. And, you know, especially I've had 4 surgeries. I beat myself up, and I'm kind of like, I'm an emotional guy. Everyone knows, right? So even with myself, so I'll convince myself that I'm fine, and I will try to operate at the same level of intensity all the time. And so it gives me a way to kind of move away from that and to really listen to what my body's trying to tell me, but still get in the work that makes me feel good. You know, like Rob always says, like, well, do you feel good? Do you feel better? Are you enjoying it? Good. You know what I mean? And so he tries to get us more in tune with our bodies. So we're not just following some protocol for protocol's sake. We're really trying to understand the effects we're having on ourselves as we age, as we perform, as we go on day to day. And this has been incredibly valuable for me. He uses a lot of different movement selection. So he doesn't believe like this movement means this. Hey man, you don't like that movement? What else do you want to do? You know? And so he finds different ways to get me to do the things that I like without beating the shit out of myself to do it. So
it's almost like the constraint-led approach to S&C.
Yeah, so well, that's what he's doing, man. Like Rob and I talk all the time. Like he's become a friend of mine, and we nerd out. He'll call me and like talk to me for like 45 minutes. I was thinking about this. And so yeah, he's starting to try to really dig deeper into the experience the individual is having and how that affects the protocols or the things that he tells us to do.
The training at Westside Barbell was like pretty similar to what you guys are describing. I mean, you'd have a max effort day, and we had, I don't know, 5 to 8 different exercises for maybe upper or lower body, depending on what we were working on that particular day. And usually somebody would say something, and they would say something terrible like chain suspended good mornings, which is like probably the worst one to do. Or someone might say Zercher squat or something like that. And it was like whoever threw out the worst idea, that was the one we were probably going to go with, because we knew it was like the hardest, and most people didn't want to do it because it was working on a weakness and stuff like that. And then, you know, the next week, the other guy who had a stronger, deadlift could now, show off on the deadlift workout that we did. So it kind of reminds me of some of that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know enough about Louis, except that I know that he used a lot of variation in his method. And so, yeah, I think it's good to be able to kind of still challenge yourself, but do it in different ways.
It's similar to what we were talking about earlier. Like that variation kind of preserves the body a little bit instead of doing the repetitive thing every day. You know, you still get stronger. You still get, the outcomes you want, but less wear and tear on the chassis.
I'm curious about that. You said that Rob has worked with Brian McKenzie, and you mentioned the gear system. So I think actually when Greg was on the podcast before, he was talking about like the way you breathe when you roll, like how it's rare to see you with your mouth open, right?
Oh, yeah.
Rare as fuck.
If I'm going with my brother, maybe I'm starting to breathe hard, yeah.
But let's get into that. What, what got you to that point of being able to have that type of capacity and efficient movement where you're not gassing yourself out with most people?
Right. So I think one of the things that Rob and I first focused on was developing a good aerobic base. I'm not trying to become a marathon runner or anything like that, but just in a good aerobic base, one, for just being efficient in terms of just moving, and two, for recovery, because you have a good aerobic base, you could train more because you're recovering a little faster. But all of that was mainly developed in a controlled environment on the bike or on any modality. So one of the things he had me do was like, you do your test. I forgot what the test was, and it spits out your breath cadence. For if you guys worked with Brian McKenzie before, it has that little calculator, and once you get your breath cadence, that's your gear one. Like for me, it was like 3 seconds inhale, 3 seconds exhale. And I try to develop power output within that constraint of having 3 seconds inhale, 3 seconds out, exhale. And one of the things, like at first, I was probably like 48 RPM on the bike, on the Aerodyne bike. And then as my aerobic base developed, it was like getting up to 60, like on that same cadence. On the same cadence. But I never did that on the mat, right? I never focused on my breath on the mat, right? But what that training did allow me to do was get aware of when I'm getting up to red line. Like I'll be training and then a certain exchange, I'll notice I open my mouth and like, okay, this is where, you just note it. You don't have to change anything with your breath. It's just note I am in this zone, right?
Yeah.
How do you, like, one of the things the gear system helped me with is to gauge effort without having a heart rate monitor.
Yeah.
That's like one of the biggest things. Like, when I'm going with my brother and we're doing a wrestling scramble and I'm like inhaling and exhaling out of my mouth, I know where I'm at, like generally, and that's real big into like matches. Like if like you go, we just did the 6-minute regulation and we're about to go into overtime. Can you just be aware of where you're at on your breath and be like, all right. And then where Rob helped me is like, down regulation protocols, getting ready to get into this next bout. We train that in a controlled environment, not off the mat, and it just increases your awareness when you're actually doing the sport.
It also helps you like gauge where your opponent is, though.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Do I like that? That's one of the things I do. Like, I won't notice myself breathing, but I'll notice when you're breathing out your mouth, and now I'll just gear it up a little bit, and you're cooked, man.
Yeah, don't squeak when you're training with him, man.
Don't emote or anything. Man. You just gotta be like, I'll turn the gear up.
This is an interesting thing. Are you, this is an assumption, but are you stone-faced when you kind of like train? Like, is there no expression on your face?
I don't know.
I
think so, yeah.
Actually, it's funny. I watch him all the time because I'm like trying to figure him out, like what do we do next? There are two things that I can tell.
Yeah.
If he grits, so like he'll grit when he's in the middle of like a hard effort. And or his eyes will change. He's more expressive with his eyes than anything else. So he doesn't, but he's calm most of the time. So it just depends on the level of push through the exchange. So yeah, stoic 90% of the time. The teeth grit is when he's in the shit. And then occasionally when he's like fully focused, eyes change too. So, but nothing else much.
Have you found any, because again, you've been rolling for a long time, so maybe a lot of this stuff is second nature, but have you found anything to keeping the face relaxed?
Fumble.
Keeping I never really noticed.
I know you don't I know you're not trying to keep your face relaxed, but it just is, right?
Yeah, I've never really put any like intentional effort into like keeping a face relaxed or like having a poker face. I just, maybe that's a byproduct of having good basic aerobic conditioning, or having, like understanding your breath. I think maybe that's a byproduct. I'd never really intentionally just try to have a cold face.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think for myself, honestly, it's like, it's funny. I was talking to someone about the other day, like when you see me in waking life, I can look stressed or mean or whatever. When I'm grappling, I look incredibly calm. And I think I've noticed why. I don't think about myself when I'm grappling. Like I'm just focused on what I'm doing. So the rest of me is like, that's not being used, doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to put all my intention on what's in front of me. So that keeps me calm. And I've noticed that with other athletes that aren't really focused on their feelings, that they have this same demeanor too. And you see another famous athletes out there where they're expressionless and they used to be the more cold grapplers. Because again, I think that just shows what level of focus they're operating at. They're external. They're not focusing on their feelings.
So how about when, Deandre, how about when you are in camp? Like what does that like training split look like with jiu-jitsu and, strength and conditioning?
So when I'm preparing for something, I'm probably, we're doing Monday, Tuesday, we're doing a two-a-day training session. So either 2 afternoon sessions or a morning and evening session. Wednesday is like a single session, or when I was getting ready for ADCC, or the trials, I was just like take that day completely off. And usually the numbers would agree to take the day off. And so that was a good thing about having the numbers, was like it kind of like supported like take this day off, it's for the better. And then Thursday would be another 2-a-day. And Friday, Saturday, Sunday will be a single session. That's on the mat. But then based on what I'm reading off of those metrics, the subjective metrics or the objective metrics, I would talk to Rob and say, what's the best for today? What is the best thing to do today? And I had my basic things I had to hit for the week, your basic number of strength training sessions. And, he's prescribing RPEs of like, you're feeling like this is where we're working at. And that, not necessarily, you guys know how the benefit of RPE, like the weight doesn't really matter because you're changing every day.
Mm-hmm.
So we use that scale to continue to do our strength and conditioning, still get those adaptations we want while we're in camp. And it's probably like maybe, 3 or 4 strength and conditioning sessions a week, but not like varying RPEs.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still adapting. And then when I'm in camp, I'm probably doing a little bit of in the morning, some cardiovascular conditioning. I'm probably get the Morpheus on and making sure I'm hitting those numbers. I like hitting the Morpheus numbers because from my experience, it's always helped me kind of continue to get progress in conditioning without having to fry me. Yeah.
And that's
Morpheus, by the way, is an app, and it's a heart rate monitor invented by Joel Jameson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Is that where you're getting majority of your metrics from? Is the Morpheus strap?
Yeah, so the HRV and resting heart rate information, and then whatever zones I'm in when I'm doing my conditioning, I use the Morpheus strap. I liked it because when I remember when it came out, my brother likes, he was trying to put me on the Oura Ring and the Whoop. And one of the things that, for me personally, if I saw that information every day, I'll be so neurotic about it.
Yeah.
I'll be trying to play, it'll mess me up. So the thing with the Morpheus was like, oh, cool. I could do it once a day in a controlled environment, and I know when it's taking my data. I said, okay, if I just do it on the same day every time, for me personally, it works better.
Yeah.
That's dope. Why the switch to a no-gi?
Really, when I did the switch, it was in 2020. Everything shut down. So I remember that in 2020, I had just done the Europeans in the gi, and I was ramping up to do the Worlds, but then everything shut down, and then pretty much all tournaments shut down, and it just gave me time. It's like, how am I going to take grappling how am I going to do grappling and make it interesting? I started doing no-gi. And then also at the same time, I started going to standard. It was like, for whatever reason, it just all worked out. Like COVID, meeting the girl, it was like all worked out at the right time. And then now I'm here.
Yeah. You like no-gi more than gi?
I haven't touched the gi in
4 years?
In 5 years, 4 years, 5 years. Yeah, I haven't touched the gi. I mean, if you think about it, like in terms of what professional grappling, like the big, like we were talking about ADCC and CJI, it's all no-gi. That's where the professional grappling is going, and I think it's we were talking about it earlier, like it's a good time to be a good grappler.
Yeah, it's starting to be a little bit of money and
absolutely
prize money and stuff, right?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I got my black belt with the Gi-On. I trained for 12 years with Gi-On, and in 2016, right before I had knee surgery, I went up and trained with John Danaher and all his crew. And that was the first time I ever touched guys that never trained with the Gi-On, really. A lot of the guys, I mean, I know Gordon did and stuff, but that was so convincing. I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to move a body without grabbing the uniform. So for me, it was like so eye-opening. I hadn't put the Gi-On since in 2016. And so then I started working on making the full transition. And so by the time he had come to me, I hadn't put the Gi-On in 4 or 5 years either. And so during conversations, I just shared my thoughts, and he seemed like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea. I'll give it a shot, and just here we are.
Next thing is no mats. No gi, no mats.
Well, they got the pit.
Actually, it's probably a suit. Putting on a suit.
Oh, yeah, I did see that. Yeah,
I've seen that. They did a match in suits in the pit.
I thought that was pretty cool. I thought that was great. Deandre, last question for me. Obviously, I know you got a lot of experience with competing, but since you are a pretty chill guy, what's like, I guess, some of your advice to help a competitor stay calm for competition? Because I'm still fairly new to the sport. But I just know that like my first one, I was just like so freaked out. And the next one was like a lot more calm, and I did way better. But what's your advice there?
I mean, you already kind of answering it there. I mean, you might not like my answers. Like, you just gotta do it more. It's like, I'll tell you what, I feel the same way prior to every match. It's just I have, you know, ways to cope with that and then calm myself down. Or if I'm too calm, I know how to ramp myself up. You know, we learn about that, you know. But I think talking about young grapplers, to be honest, if you had the opportunity, and this is a kind of a weird answer, but like if you had the opportunity to wrestle for school, I would do it. Because wrestling, the amount of competition you have in the span of 4 months is very high. You have like 30, 40 matches in the span of 4 months. And even if you don't get good at wrestling, you at least get used to competing. And I think that's the biggest thing, you know. Like I said, all the competitors, all the high-level competitors have competed before. And that's why they're good at it. And to get better at competing, you just got to compete. You know, early on, compete as much as you can. Once you get that XP, you know, you can start dialing it back and picking the ones that make the most noise and have the most prestige. In this case, now these days, pay the most money. You know, but you got to put that early XP on. And I attribute a lot of that to when I was wrestling in high school, because I think in a 4-year span, you have like 150 matches, probably more, and you got to deal with that every time, competing like 3 times a week. It's huge, I think. So any young grappler that has opportunity to wrestle for a school, I would do it, because one, it's free when you're doing it for school. Yeah.
No, that's actually a real thing though, because like, you know, people when they think about competing, they're like, oh yeah, it's just like training. Like there's a different level of pressure.
That's why it's competition.
You feel like there is, but yeah.
Right, yeah.
But we talk about it all the time. So if we're trying to make our practice as representative as possible of the training environment or performance environment, there's things that we can't replicate in the room. And the only way to get those touches is to get those touches. Like getting up at a certain weight with a certain emotion, with a certain level of urgency against a stranger you've never met. How the hell do we replicate that, right? So you got to go out there and do it.
I think my brother is reading... was it Super Training? That's the book, right?
Mel Siff, yeah.
Yeah, they talk about competitive maximums. You know what I'm saying? You can't touch that unless you're competing. You know, I'll tell you experience when I'm doing a 6-minute match and like when getting ready for or in a trials and trying to like get my ticket to go to wherever. How come after that match I feel like absolutely spent? When the day before or the week before I was doing 10-minute rounds 10 times, you know,
right.
There is a significant difference between competition and training. And once you start to realize that, and then you can't really change that about the nature of those things, the only way to get good at it is you always got to compete and find ways to compete, you know?
You have a competition coming up pretty soon. I know you said just a little off-season-ish, but then you're probably rolling into something soon, right?
Yeah, so for the rest of the year, I got nothing. I might do something early 2025, but the biggest thing, I got a pretty big bracket or a 16-man invitational or a bracket in March. Yeah, so I got some time to prep a little bit. I might do something a little early in the year, just get back into that state again, which I think is beneficial too. Like, cool. Don't enter something big until you've gotten that sharpened a little bit.
Where can people find you? Oh, good.
Actually, I'm curious, man. I know you don't know exactly, but how long would you like to be competing? Like,
so that's I don't know. I don't really know. I take at this point in the time, I'm taking it 1 year at a time.
Yeah,
I'm just like really just one like quarter of the year at a time. I don't know, 34. 35, I think that's what people say the prime is, right? And then at that time, I started making the transition to coaching.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe, you know, I'm working with Rob and working with all these guys, and we're talking about different ways to like keep performance as long as you can, like performance longevity. I think that might push to past 35. I don't know.
Yeah, there's masters divisions too.
Yeah, there is.
Nah, I think you can keep top shape until your 40s, man. I really do think
Especially with TRT.
I think you can do without it too. I do have one other question though. Now, with when a lot of people ask, "Oh, how do I learn this?" You refer to them to books because they need to learn how to learn, right? Do you guys ever plan, or do you have anything online where you've like structured like this aspect of things for people to learn?
So currently I'm just doing seminars for people who want them. You know what I mean? Like my whole thing is I started giving all this information away for free because I wanted to let people know that I was just curious about the process and I wanted to share it. And then I was learning it from researchers and scientists, and I was just applying it. And I wanted to share my story and the way I did it. But I don't know what the value is. And so there's no reason to put a price tag on something. We're just talking about what we're all trying to understand. So that's how I started approaching it. But now it'd be nice, if people find like what I have to say has value and they think I'm producing things, reach out to me and we'll do work. You know what I mean? But yeah, there's some stuff in the pipeline. Me and my editor and the guy who does all our videos have talked, and there's been some things that got in the way of us building some content. But I don't know, it's all on the books. But either way, I'm doing seminars right now. I'll go anywhere if you guys want to pay for me to be there. And I call, people do consultation calls with me. Like I do everything I can to spread the information and help people out. So, yeah, but no, nothing solid on the internet right now.
Gotcha.
It's all just interacting with me or my students.
You mentioned reading a lot of books. What are maybe a couple books you can recommend to people?
So if anyone, if you go to my IG at GD Souders, I put up a post the other day. I took 2 pictures of like the few books I've read in the last, however many years, and people have been picking through that and kind of selecting, and those are the ones that I think have been most beneficial for me. But just to give a quick answer, anything by Rob Gray. Rob Gray is the professor that I started learning all of this stuff from, and he has 3 books out: How We Learn to Move, Learning to Optimize Movement. Yeah, that's the post right there. And How to Become an Ecological Coach. And I think Rob does a really good job at crossing the line between academic understanding and explaining it to people who aren't academically trained. And so I would start there.
Where can people find you guys?
At GD Souders on IG or at Standard Jiu-Jitsu, or just come to our gym. We're recruiting fellas.
I got the most basic Instagram handle, Deandre _Corbe, first name _ last name.
There we go.
No question, it's me. It's but yeah, I'll say that too. Like everybody come through. If you're in the DC area, Rockville, Maryland, dude, we don't have a visitor fee or anything like that. Come through, train with my brother and I, train with all the team. It's see for yourself. That's what I like to say. Like, see for yourself. I think it'll clear a lot of things up and like misconceptions of what we're doing out there. Yeah.
Strength is never weakness. Weakness never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.